The wind carried dust and secrets through the streets of Willow Creek, and Lydia Morren carried both in her tired heart. She had run so far, but the past clung to her like shadows at dusk. If this town didn't let her stay, she didn't know where else to go. Lydia stepped off the creaky stagecoach, her boots sinking into the dry earth. The sun burned bright overhead, but she kept her head down, her dark hair hiding her face like a curtain. In her hands, she clutched her sewing box, the only thing she had left from her old life. The stitches inside had once mended dresses and seams, but now she needed them to mend something far more broken herself. The town of Willow Creek was small, just a few wooden buildings lining the main street. A general store, a blacksmith, a saloon with peeling paint. People moved slowly here, like they had all the time in the world. Lydia didn't. Every minute she stood in the open, she risked being seen, recognized. Her stomach growled, but the coins in her pocket were too few to waste. She needed work, a place to sleep, somewhere to disappear. She walked into the general store, the bell above the door jingling too loudly. The shopkeeper, a man with a thick mustache, looked up from his ledger. "Help you, ma'am." Lydia swallowed. I'm looking for sewing work. Mending, alterations, anything." The man frowned. "Don't need help. Mrs. Pritchard does all our sewing." Her heart sank. She forced herself to nod, to turn away before he saw the desperation in her eyes. Outside, the heat pressed down on her shoulders. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. Crying wouldn't help. Running wouldn't either. Not anymore. Then a voice, soft but steady. "You all right, child?" Lydia turned. A woman in a plain dress and a kind face stood nearby, her hands folded in front of her. A cross hung around her neck. Lydia's voice cracked. "I just need work." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Come with me." She led Lydia down the street, past the saloon, toward a small church with a white steeple. "Name's Edith," the woman said. "My husband's a pastor here, but I think I know someone who might help you." Lydia's fingers tightened around her sewing box. "Who?" "Boaz McAllister. Owns a ranch just outside town. Good man. Quiet. He could use someone to fix up his clothes and linens, I reckon." A ranch. Away from the town. Away from prying eyes. Lydia's breath came a little easier. Edith smiled. "He's blind, but don't let that fool you. He sees more than most." Lydia didn't know what that meant, but she didn't care. If this Boaz would give her a corner to sleep in, she'd sew every stitch perfectly. She'd be invisible. Edith handed her a slip of paper with directions. "Follow the road east. Can't miss it." Lydia took it, her hands trembling. "Thank you." The woman's eyes softened. "Everyone needs a little mercy sometimes." Lydia walked away, her heart pounding. This was her last chance. If Boaz McAllister turned her away, she had nowhere else to go. But for the first time in a long time, she let herself hope. Lydia followed the dirt road east, as Sister Edith had instructed. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the land in shades of gold and orange. Her feet ached, but she kept walking, clutching her sewing box like a lifeline. At last she saw it. A ranch house with a wide porch, surrounded by wooden fences and grazing horses. The place looked sturdy, well kept, but lonely. No children laughed in the yard. No woman stood in the doorway. Just a single figure sitting on the porch steps, his face tilted toward the setting sun. Boaz McAllister. Lydia hesitated. What if he sent her away? What if he asked questions she couldn't answer? But she had no choice. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The man turned his head at the sound of her footsteps. He didn't look at her, not exactly. His eyes were a pale, cloudy blue, unseeing. But somehow, she felt like he noticed everything. "You lost." His voice was deep, calm. Lydia swallowed. "No, sir. Sister Edith sent me. She said you might need sewing done." A slow nod. "Edith's a good woman." He stood, taller than she expected, his broad shoulders blocking the last of the sunlight. "What's your name?" "Lydia." She didn't offer more. Last names could be dangerous. Boaz didn't press. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond her words. The wind, the way her voice shook. "I got a pile of shirts needing mending," he said finally. "You any good with a needle?" "Yes." She held up her sewing box like proof. "Then we'll trade. You fix my clothes. I'll give you a room and meals." Lydia's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you." Boaz motioned toward the house. "Come on in. I'll show you where you'll stay." As she followed him inside, Lydia glanced around. The house was simple: wooden floors, a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a well-scrubbed table. But it was clean, warm. A home. Boaz led her to a small room at the back. A narrow bed, a wash basin, a chair by the window. "This do?" Lydia nodded before remembering he couldn't see it. "Yes, it's perfect." He handed her a bundle of clothes from a nearby shelf. "These are the worst of it. Take your time." She took the clothes, her fingers brushing against his. His hands were rough, scarred, a rancher's hands. But his touch was careful, like he knew how easy it was to break things. Boaz turned to leave, then paused. "You don't have to hide in here," he said quietly. "The front room's got better light for sewing." Lydia froze. How did he know she wanted to hide? Before she could ask, he was gone, his boots thudding softly down the hall. She sat on the bed, clutching the clothes to her chest. This man was blind, but he saw too much, and that scared her more than any bounty hunter. Lydia woke at dawn, her body stiff from days of travel. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the sunlight streaming through the window, the pile of mending waiting on the chair. Willow Creek, Boaz's ranch. She dressed quickly and crept into the front room, where Boaz already sat at the table, a cup of coffee between his hands. "You're up early," he said. Lydia jumped. She hadn't made a sound. "How did you?" Floorboards creaked different under light steps. He pushed a second cup toward her. "Coffee." She took it, surprised. "Thank you." They sat in silence as she sipped the bitter drink. Boaz didn't fill the quiet with pointless words, and Lydia was grateful. She'd spent too long around men who talked just to hear themselves. Finally, she set to work on the mending. The shirts were worn thin at the elbows, the seams frayed. Good fabric, though, well cared for. Boaz listened as she sewed, his head tilted slightly. "You're quick," he remarked after a while. Lydia glanced up. "You can tell. Rhythm of the needle. Fast but even. You've done this a long time." She looked down at her hands. "Since I was a girl." "Who taught you?" Her needle hesitated. "My mother." It was the first true thing she'd said about her past. Boaz nodded, like he understood the weight of that admission. "Mine taught me to braid rope. Said every man ought to know how to fix what's broken." Lydia peeked at him. "Can you still do it? Even after?" She trailed off, guilty. "Even blind?" He smiled slightly. "Yeah, hands remember what eyes forget." She sewed another stitch, wondering what her own hands remembered. The feel of her husband's grip, the weight of a gun she never wanted to hold. Boaz's voice broke her thoughts. "Storm's coming." Lydia looked out the window. The sky was clear. "How do you know?" "Air's thicker." Birds stopped singing. He stood. "I'll bring the horses in." As he walked outside, Lydia watched him move, steady, sure, never stumbling, like he saw the world in a way she didn't. She returned to her sewing, but her mind wandered. This man asked no questions, demanded no answers, and somehow, that made her want to give them. But trust was dangerous, and Lydia couldn't afford danger, not when her past was still hunting her. The first rumble of thunder rolled across the sky like a distant drumbeat. Lydia jumped at the sound, her needle slipping and pricking her finger. A tiny bead of blood welled up, but she barely noticed. Her breath came too fast, her hands trembling as memories crashed over her. Another storm, another night. Her husband's voice sharp with anger, the sound of shattering glass. "Lydia." Boaz's voice cut through the memory. He stood in the doorway, his face turned toward her, though his eyes saw nothing. "You all right?" She swallowed hard, pressing her injured finger to her skirt. "Fine. Just Storms make me nervous. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, pounding against the roof like fists. Boaz moved to the fireplace and added another log. The flames leaped higher, casting flickering shadows on the walls. "Come sit by the fire," he said. "Cold gets into bones during a storm." Lydia hesitated, but the growing chill drove her closer to the hearth. She perched on the edge of the wooden chair, her sewing forgotten in her lap. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room for one blinding second. Thunder followed instantly, a deafening crack that made Lydia flinch. Her heart raced like a spooked horse. Boaz didn't react to the noise. He simply reached out and placed his hand on the mantel, his fingers tracing the rough stone as if measuring its strength. "Storms don't last," he said quietly. "This house has stood through worse." Another thunderclap shook the walls. Lydia clenched her jaw to keep from crying out. Then Boaz did something unexpected. He began to speak, his voice steady and calm, describing the rain as if it were a song. "Hear how it starts on the roof. That's the light part, like fingers tapping. Now listen. It's shifting to the left side where the gutters are. That's the deeper sound, like a drum." Lydia found herself listening, matching his words to the noises around her. The storm was still loud, still frightening, but somehow smaller. "Breathe with it," Boaz said, "and when the wind pulls, out when it pushes." She tried, her chest rising and falling in time with the gusts outside. Slowly, her heartbeat steadied. For the first time in years, someone had seen her panic, and instead of using it against her, they'd helped. The realization made her eyes burn. Boaz turned his face toward the window. "Rain's letting up." Lydia hadn't even noticed. But he was right. The drumbeat on the roof was softening. She wiped her cheeks quickly. "How did you know what to do?" He shrugged. "My sister used to fear storms. I learned how to walk her through them." There was a pause. "You carry a storm inside you, Lydia. I can hear it in your voice." The words struck deep. She looked down at her hands, at the half-mended shirt in her lap. "I don't know how to make that one pass." Boaz nodded. "Takes time, but you're safe here." Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle patter. The worst was over, and for the first time, Lydia almost believed him. The morning after the storm dawned clear and bright. Lydia stepped onto the porch, breathing in the clean, damp air. Everything looked washed fresh, the grass greener, the sky bluer. Even her worries felt lighter. Boaz emerged behind her, his boots thumping on the wooden planks. "Going into town today?" Lydia tensed. She'd avoided Willow Creek since arriving, but they needed supplies. "If you'd like." "I would." He held out a list. "Can you read it for me?" She took the paper, her fingers brushing his. "Flour, coffee beans, 2 pounds of nails." As she read, Boaz tilted his head. "You've got a good voice for reading." Clear. Heat crept into her cheeks. No one had ever complimented her voice before. An hour later, Lydia walked down Willow Creek's main street with a basket over her arm. The town seemed friendlier today. Women nodded to her. Children darted past laughing. She even smiled at the shopkeeper who'd once turned her away. Then she saw him. A stranger leaned against the saloon porch, his boots crossed at the ankles. He wore a dark coat despite the heat, and his eyes scanned the street like a hawk searching for prey. When his gaze landed on Lydia, something in his expression sharpened. Her blood turned to ice. She ducked into the general store, her heart pounding. Through the window, she watched the man push off the wall and stroll toward the sheriff's office. The shopkeeper's wife noticed her staring. "That's Von Kellier, bounty hunter. Nasty business." She lowered her voice. "He's asking about some woman connected to an outlaw gang," showing her picture around. Lydia's hands clenched around her basket. Her picture. She finished the shopping in a daze, barely hearing the prices. As she stepped back outside, she caught snippets of conversation from passing townsfolk. "Says she's dangerous. Rewards big enough to tempt anyone." Her breath came too fast. She had to get back to the ranch. Had to run. But as she hurried down the road, a voice called out behind her. "Ma'am." You dropped this. Lydia turned. Von Kelliher stood there, holding a spool of thread that had fallen from her basket. Up close, his smile didn't reach his cold eyes. Thank you, she whispered, taking it. His fingers lingered a second too long. New in town? Yes. Just visiting. Pretty place to visit. His gaze swept over her face like he was memorizing it. You favor the woman I'm looking for. Same dark hair. Same. He tapped his own cheek, where Lydia had a small scar near her ear. Interesting mark. Every muscle in her body screamed to flee. Instead, she forced herself to meet his eyes. Lots of women so. Lots of scars. Vaughn's smile widened. True, but not many hide in little towns with new names, do they? Before she could respond, Sister Edith appeared at her side. Lydia, there you are. Boaz was wondering what kept you. She linked arms with Lydia, pulling her away. Good day, Mr. Kelliher. The bounty hunter tipped his hat. Ma'am, but his eyes followed Lydia until she turned the corner. Back at the ranch, Lydia didn't tell Boaz about the encounter. She put away the supplies with shaking hands, then excused herself to her room. That night, she packed her few belongings into her sewing box. She couldn't stay, not with Vaughn so close. But as she reached for the door, Boaz spoke from the hallway. Running won't solve it. She hadn't heard him approach. Had he been waiting there all night? Lydia's voice broke. You don't understand what'll do. I understand fear. Boaz stepped forward, his unseeing eyes somehow piercing right through her. But I also understand this. You're stronger than you think. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. Somewhere far off, Coyote answered. Lydia stood frozen between the door and the man who'd shown her more kindness than anyone in years. For the first time, running didn't feel like the only choice. The morning sun had barely risen when Lydia heard the sound of horses approaching. She peeked through the kitchen window, and her stomach dropped. Von Kelliher rode toward the ranch with Sheriff Hargrove beside him. Boaz sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. He didn't turn toward the window, but his shoulders tensed. Company coming? Lydia's voice came out thin. The bounty hunter and the sheriff. Boaz set his cup down carefully. You got two choices. Hide in the root cellar or stand beside me. Her hands trembled. Hiding would be safer, but something in Boaz's calm voice made her straighten her spine. I'll stay. The horses stopped outside. Boots crunched on gravel. Then Vaughn's voice called. Mr. McAllister? Sheriff Hargrove here. Got a few questions for you. Boaz walked to the door, Lydia trailing behind. He opened it wide, his face unreadable. Morning, Sheriff. What brings you out this early? Vaughn pushed forward before the sheriff could answer. His cold eyes locked onto Lydia. Well, the seamstress from town. Sheriff Hargrove tipped his hat. Mississippi. We're asking around about a woman connected to the Gatlin gang. You new to these parts? Lydia's mouth went dry. Boaz spoke first. She's been here near 2 weeks. Does sewing for me in exchange for room and board. Vaughn smirked. Convenient arrangement. He pulled a folded paper from his coat, a wanted poster. Lydia's stomach twisted at the sketch. The face looked like hers, but harder, angrier. Lydia Morren, wanted for questioning in connection with armed robberies and forgery. Boaz didn't react to the paper. Something you need from us, Sheriff? Hargrove shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Kelliher here thinks your seamstress might be the woman he's tracking. Vaughn stepped closer. Notice how she ain't denied it. Lydia forced herself to meet his gaze. Because it's ridiculous. I meant clothes. That's all. Vaughn's smile didn't reach his eyes. Funny thing, the real Lydia Morren was known for her needlework too, and she's got a scar right. He reached toward Lydia's cheek. Boaz moved faster than Lydia expected. His large hand clamped around Vaughn's wrist, stopping him inches from her face. You'll keep your hands to yourself on my property. The air went still. Even the birds stopped singing. Sheriff Hargrove cleared his throat. Now, Boaz, no need for. I answered your questions, Boaz said evenly. Unless you're here to arrest someone, We've got work to do. Vaughn yanked his arm free, glaring. This ain't over. As they rode away, Lydia's legs nearly gave out. Boaz guided her to a chair, his touch gentle now. You did good. She stared at the floor. He knows it's me. Boaz nodded. Maybe. But knowing ain't proving. And the sheriff's not eager to arrest someone on a bounty hunter's word alone. Lydia looked up at him. Why did you help me? His cloudy eyes seemed to see straight into her soul. Because everyone deserves a chance to start over. A lump formed in her throat. For the first time, she let herself believe that might be true. Lydia couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her jump. Vaughn's smug face haunted her thoughts. He wouldn't give up. Men like him never did. At dawn, she packed her sewing box with shaking hands. She'd leave before Boaz woke. It was the only way to protect him. The floorboard squeaked as she crept toward the door. Running won't free you. Boaz stood in the hallway, fully dressed despite the early hour. Had he been waiting for her? Lydia hugged her box to her chest. You don't understand what he'll do. Vaughn will. Keep chasing. Keep threatening. Boaz stepped closer. Unless we stop him. She shook her head. There's no we. This is my mess. Boaz surprised her then. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and rested his hands on her shoulders. You ain't alone anymore, Lydia. Let me help. Tears burned her eyes. I don't know how to stop being afraid. His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped. Courage ain't the absence of fear. It's moving forward anyway. Outside, the first birds began their morning songs. The world kept turning, even when hers felt shattered. Lydia took a shuddering breath. What do we do? Boaz's mouth set in a determined line. First, we talked to Sheriff Hargrove, without Vaughn around. Then, he paused. Then we prove that poster's lying. Lydia looked down at her sewing box, the only thing she'd carried from her old life. Maybe it was time to stop carrying the weight of her past, too. She set the box down on the table. Okay. One simple word. But for Lydia Morren, it meant everything. The ride into town felt different this time. Lydia sat straight in the saddle, her back no longer hunched in fear. Beside her, Boaz guided his horse with quiet confidence, his face turned toward the sun like he could read direction from its warmth. Sheriff Hargrove's office was small and cluttered, wanted posters pinned to the walls, a coffee pot steaming on the stove. He looked up when they entered, his eyebrows lifting. Boaz, Mississippi didn't expect to see you again so soon. Boaz removed his hat. We need to talk, Sheriff. Without Vaughn Kelly around. The sheriff leaned back in his chair, studying them. I figured you might. He motioned to the seats across from him. Speak your piece. Lydia's palms dampened as she sat. This was it, the moment she'd feared for years. Telling the truth. Boaz spoke first. That bounty hunter's after the wrong woman. Hargrove rubbed his jaw. He's got a poster with her name and likeness. It's a lie. Lydia's voice surprised her with its steadiness. She met the sheriff's gaze. My husband was part of the Gatlin gang. Not me. When he died, they blamed me for his crimes. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You got proof of that? Boaz placed a folded letter on the desk. Edith helped me find this at the church records office. Notice the date. Hargrove unfolded the paper. His frown deepened as he read. This says you were married in Cedar Ridge 2 years ago. But the Gatlin gang's last robbery was 3 years ago, Lydia finished. I wasn't even his wife then. But Vaughn won't care about that. The rewards for any Gatlin associate, guilty or not. The sheriff sighed, rubbing his forehead. Kellier's been pushing me to arrest you since yesterday. Says he's got witness statements. Boaz's voice turned hard. Bought and paid for, most like. Outside, the sound of shouting erupted. Vaughn's voice carried through the walls. Where is she? I know they're here. The office door slammed open. Vaughn stood framed in the doorway, his face flushed with anger. Well, the blind man and his little fugitive. He jabbed a finger at Lydia. Sheriff, arrest her now or I'll... You'll what? Hargrove stood, his chair scraping back. "This is my town, Kellier, and I've just seen proof that poster of yours is misleading at best." Vaughn's eyes darted between them. "That don't mean nothing. She's still." Boaz took a step forward. "She's innocent, and you know it." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Vaughn's hand twitched toward his gun. Lydia's breath caught, but Boaz didn't flinch. He simply turned his head slightly, as if listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. The sheriff's hand rested on his own pistol. "I wouldn't, Kellier." Vaughn's lip curled, but slowly his hand dropped. "This ain't over." He pointed at Lydia. "You can't hide behind these people forever." As he stormed out, Lydia's knees weakened with relief, but Boaz's face remained grim. Hargrove sank back into his chair. "He'll be back with more evidence." Men like him always do. Lydia looked at Boaz, then at the sheriff. "Then we need to be ready." For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting back. The church basement smelled of old books and candle wax. Lydia, Boaz, and Sister Edith pored over records spread across a long table, marriage certificates, newspaper clippings, anything that could prove Lydia's innocence. Edith held up a yellowed newspaper. "Here, the Gatlin gang's last robbery was April 1879, but your marriage certificate is dated June 1880. Lydia traced the dates with her finger, so I couldn't have been involved. Boaz sat quietly, his fingers drumming the table. "That's good, but it's not enough. Vaughn will say you were with them before the marriage." Lydia's shoulders slumped. Then she remembered something. "Wait, my husband. He kept records. Of everything." She hesitated. "Even the crimes." Edith gasped. "You have those?" "No, but I know where they might be." Lydia looked at Boaz. "There's a cabin up in the hills near Cedar Ridge. He used it as a hideout. If those papers are still there." Boaz nodded. "They'd prove exactly who did what." The sheriff entered, his boots heavy on the wooden stairs. Kellier just rode out of town, headed north. Lydia's blood ran cold, toward Cedar Ridge. Hargrove removed his hat. "I can't officially help you, but if you were to find proof before he does." Boaz stood. "We'll leave at first light." That night, Lydia sat on the porch, staring at the stars. Boaz joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "You afraid?" he asked. Lydia wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Terrified, but not like before." She looked at him. "Thank you for believing in me." Boaz's smile was barely visible in the moonlight. Didn't take much believing. The truth has a sound to it. As the crickets chirped around them, Lydia realized something. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom anymore. She was fighting for the life she'd begun to build, for the man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. And that made all the difference. The cabin looked just as Lydia remembered: weathered wood, a sagging porch, and the same broken shutter tapping in the wind like a ghost knocking to be let in. She dismounted, her legs stiff from the long ride. Boaz stood beside her, his head tilted as if listening to the secrets the old walls held. "He's been here," Boaz murmured. Fresh boot prints marked the dirt, and the door hung slightly ajar. Lydia's breath caught. "Vaughn." Inside, the cabin was a wreck. Furniture overturned, floorboards pried up. Someone had searched every inch. Lydia went straight to the stone fireplace, running her fingers along the mortar until she found the loose brick. "Please still be there." The brick came free with a scrape. Behind it lay a tin box, untouched. Her hands shook as she opened it. Papers. Dozens of them, dates, names, details in her late husband's slanted handwriting. Boaz knelt beside her. "This what we need." Lydia scanned the pages. "More than we need. It lists every job, every person involved. My name's nowhere in it." She looked up, tears blurring her vision. "I'm free." A shadow filled the doorway. Vaughn stood there, his gun drawn. "Hand that over." Boaz moved first, stepping between them. "It's done, Kellier. You've got no claim here." Vaughn's finger twitched on the trigger. "I've got every claim. That reward's mine." Lydia stood, clutching the papers to her chest. "Take it then." but you'll be taking lies. These papers prove I was never part of it." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Vaughn's arm lowered slightly. "Don't matter. A bounty hunter gets paid either way." Boaz took a slow step forward. "Or you could ride out now. Save yourself the trouble when the sheriff sees these." The standoff stretched like pulled taffy. Finally, Vaughn spat in the dirt. "This ain't worth it." He holstered his gun and turned away. At the edge of the clearing, he looked back. "You got lucky, Morren, but luck runs out." Then he was gone. The ride back to Willow Creek felt lighter. The papers sat secure in Boaz's saddlebag. The sun warmed their faces, and for the first time in years, Lydia breathed easy. 1 month later, Lydia's sewing shop opened on a Tuesday. The sign above the door read, simply, "Lydia's Stitches." Townsfolk came with mending and curiosity, leaving with fixed hems and new respect. Boaz leaned against the counter, listening to the chatter. "Sound like you're official now." Lydia tied off a thread with her teeth. "Thanks to you." He shook his head. "You did the hard part. You stayed." That evening, they sat on the porch as fireflies danced in the twilight. Lydia unfolded a quilt she'd been working on. Scraps of fabric from old dresses, Boaz's worn shirts, even a piece of the curtain from her room at the ranch. Each patch held a memory. Boaz ran his fingers over the stitching. "It's like your life. All the broken pieces made into something whole." Lydia smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Not broken anymore. Just remade. And under the wide Wyoming sky, that was enough." Thank you for joining Lydia and Boaz's journey. If you enjoyed this story of second chances and quiet strength, don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt tales of redemption and hope. Your support helps bring more stories to life.